Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Renata Singh.
And I'm Kimberly Farris Singh, and it's Thursday.
Yep. One more day to go to Friday, Kimberly.
Yeah, but we have some interesting things pertaining to DSS. The DSS founder, Karen Clark, he's now saying that he's never been on suspension. He's not been,
his attorneys are saying that he's not on suspension.
Yes, and
as the National Security Minister would have stated yesterday, they're now saying he is on a vacation that he would have applied for. So it's not like they've sent him on vacation. You know what I'm saying, Kimberly?
Well,
but, girl, this DSS scene, like I kept saying earlier on in previous shows, it's the gift that keeps giving. Literally. Every day, it's something new surfacing as it pertains to this whole DSS scene. It's really interesting, and we continue to stay abreast of what's trending in DSS world, because that seems to be a world by itself, Kimberly.
Definitely, Renata.
Yep, but in other trending news, a church elder was charged with sexual assault. Kimberly, you know, these stories are very, very heartbreaking. The elder of the Port of Spain Church was charged for sexually assaulting a 13-year-old. The 68-year-old man who lives in Curepe was arrested by the Child Protection Unit and was charged with 4 counts of sexual touching and 1 count of sexual penetration. According to the TTPS, the report was made in July 2020. Upon investigation, however, it was discovered that the incidents occurred between November 2019 and April 2020. The child, apparently, the child stated that she would attend Saturday youth meetings where the elder would wait for her to be alone in the room, and apparently that's where he allegedly assaulted a minor. But guys, you know, these things, you know, ever so often it surfaces, and it's truly heartbreaking to say the least, Kimberly, because I'm sure these parents would have, you know, dropped off their kids at the church where you think, you know, it's a safe space, and then, you know, something like this happens. It's not a nice thing. And anyone with information on child abuse, because the topic is prevalent, we need to state this. Anyone with information on child abuse can contact Childline on 800-4321 or 131, or call the Children's Authority on 996 or 800-2014, or contact the TTPS on 555-999 or 800-TIPS.
Yes, and I mean, Renata, I came across a story recently where a security guard at a children's home was caught raping a 14-year-old, and this happened in Trinidad and Tobago just this week. I saw that story. I believe that took place this week as well. And over in Guyana, another really disturbing story, because they're now investigating the death of a newborn baby after discovering that the child was sexually assaulted. So it's really, really sad when we come across stories like this. I always try to figure out what would possess a human being to do that, to inflict that type of pain. You know, it's unimaginable. I can't. Yeah.
You know, one of the things, Kimberly, and it's not a popular topic, but of course the victim would require certain how do you put it, counseling and stuff like that to, you know, overcome the trauma. It's traumatic. That's a traumatic experience. But also, the person that's committing the act, they also need help as well, Kim. And I feel like we need to I don't know, we need to open up the conversation as it pertains to mental health, as it relates to scenarios like this. You know, we say, of course, they're criminal, it's a criminal act, and in turn that makes the person a criminal. But there is a bigger picture, and I think the bigger picture is the fact that that person also needs help, psychological help, because that is not normal behavior.
Yeah,
it isn't.
Definitely it isn't, Renata. But moving things over to Barbados, a cruise ship has been asked, and they have been granted the permission to dock in Barbados on Wednesday night after, he discovered that some persons may have the COVID on board. The cruise ship has roughly 53 passengers and 68 crew workers, and they are set to meet with the relevant authorities over in Barbados. So really interesting things to look at there as cruise ships start sailing again. The threat that they pose as it pertains to this pandemic and the virus, it's still imminent, and it's something we need to pay attention to. I mean, I for one would be lining up to hop on a cruise anytime soon.
Me either, Kimberly. I think, you know, just paying attention to the news over the past few months, and, you know, persons being stuck outside, you're uncertain when you're going to get, you know, be able to come back home, etc. If you're docking in a specific country, just saying, right? You may not be able to leave the ship. Many different stories you've heard as it pertains to cruise ships over the past few months. So yeah, I'm not going to be lining up to go on any cruise anytime soon. Hats off to the persons that are brave enough to do so. I am definitely not one of those persons. But hats off to the Barbados government, though. They're quite swift in terms of their response to situations like this, Kimberly. So
good going. As I mean, they've shown themselves strong in this time. I mean, of course, they were one of the first countries to open their borders, and I mean, they never really closed their borders either as tightly as we have. And I mean,
and they seem to be managing quite well.
Yes, I mean, of course, they had little spikes and surges, you know, as they allowed persons in, but for the most part, they've seemed to have a good handle on how to manage COVID-19 while still keeping their economy alive and afloat.
Yes, definitely. But shifting things over to St. Lucia, St. Lucia actually is, well, potentially their medical system is at the brink of exhaustion, and HTS News Force tells us more.
The surge in COVID-19 cases has raised concern about hospital bed shortages. Health officials indicated that although the respiratory hospital will hold some 126 patients upon completion, 82 beds are currently available for use. St. Lucia confirmed 21 new COVID-19 cases. 13 of the new cases were recorded on Saturday, November 7th. 5 of the 13 cases were captured through the contact tracing process. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar-George confirmed that the 8 new cases recorded on Sunday brought the total number of patients in care to almost 100.
And a video of a man hospitalized has since gone viral, and he showed the uncomfortable rooms that patients would have been placed in, specifically himself, and you know, it doesn't seem too sanitary, etc.
Anxiety over the case tally comes amid a now viral video of a male COVID-19 patient complaining about conditions at the respiratory hospital. In the video, the man claims he has been placed in a makeshift ward due to a lack of space, pointing out what he perceives as a number of health hazards. Health Minister Mary Isaac says the man has since been transferred.
And, you know, the health minister of St. Lucia has since stated that the man was moved from that room, that facility, and she also went on to reiterate the fact that their hospitals, the one that was shown in the video that the man would have captured, it's currently under renovations. So she's stating that the pandemic has caused them to kind of speed up, you know, the renovation process and stuff like that. But you know, it's really sad, Kimberly. So many countries, including the U.S. There's some states even in the U.S. that are reporting, you know, they're not able to cope with the amount of daily reported cases of COVID-19. So it's tough, but you know what? We're going to get through this.
Yes, but this is why we need to do all that we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones, and yeah, just do what. And the thing about it is that I will say nothing is 100% guaranteed, but if you try to follow all the guidelines, you may have a chance of not contracting the virus. So yeah, just keep doing what is recommended. Wash your hands, sanitize your hands, wear a mask, social distance. And again, I still have the same problem with the social distancing thing. Just yesterday, I had to stop off somewhere, and it was in a pharmacy, and I was in line. I stayed a distance away from the person in front of me, and then a woman came up behind me, and she was literally right up behind me.
Yeah.
And it was a bit uncomfortable. And even in that particular pharmacy, they have the cashiers stationed right next to each other, and it's one shared counter, and it's not very far apart. So even if you're standing behind the person you're trying to social distance in a line,
the person next to you is
when you decide to, well, or when it's your turn to cash, rather, you're right next to a person, like side by side to a person. So it's, you know, I feel like business places and stuff really need to pay attention to those things. I feel as though that same setup could have worked, but they just needed to, you know, just move a couple things around, like maybe the cashiers could have gone the other way. I don't know, they could have figured out a way to make it a little bit more safe for the customers that are coming
Kimberly,
in.
It's really funny that you have a story. I had a similar experience at a pharmacy as well. And of course, when you're entering any business place, the protocol is that you sanitize, right? They have, where they had their sanitization station, you have to walk past the cashiers, sanitize, and then you can go along your business. Right. But apparently this, of course, the cashiers and stuff like that, there wasn't a security at the door. So you walked in, and I stood up and I noticed several persons walking in, not sanitizing, just going into the pharmacy, picking up what they need to, etc., and interacting with, things. You know what I'm saying? If they hold something, put it back on the shelf. That is interaction. You know what I'm saying? And it really just, it blew my mind. I mean, we make mistakes, but, that small mistake can end up or prove to be something big. You understand what I'm saying, right? So we need to pay attention. After a while, though, standing in line and paying attention, the cashiers was like, oh, no, well, you need to go sanitize. That was after like 5 persons walked in, did not sanitize, and went along their business. But,
Yeah, I mean, I was driving in a kind of populated area as well, Renata, and I saw a lot of persons without their mask, and they were in public. They're standing, paying bills, whatever they're doing at the time, and they had their mask on their chins. No one was, no mask, no service was not in effect because they were still in business spaces. It was just really a sight to see, and I mean, again, we're still in a pandemic, and even though we may have pandemic fatigue, we still need to do what we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones. You see, the thing about this thing is that you never know if your body can handle it.
Yes, it's true, Kimberly. You won't know until you know, right?
Correct. And why would you want to risk that?
Exactly. Well, one of the things, Kimberly, like you're mentioning, you pass through a town. I passed through a town recently as well, and it's Christmas season, so you're seeing the bustling going on. You're seeing,
we have another national holiday. Well, it's on Saturday, so yeah.
It's all of that. It's the season for shopping and all of that.
Cleaning and buying new curtains and fixing up homes and stuff like that.
But even in the midst of that, we need to, adhere to the protocols. Don't forget that we're in a pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. But staying with pandemic news, Pfizer, the company that announced on Monday they had a 90% vaccine. Yeah, 90%.
90% accurate.
90% accurate, which is really amazing, by the way. What is even more interesting with them is that their stock soared to $56 billion on
just Monday alone. Just Monday alone.
Yeah, and France 24 brings us the story.
Next, let's look at a business story getting a lot of attention. It's not a surprise that pharmaceutical giant Pfizer's stock price surged on the news. Its coronavirus vaccine is 90% effective in late-stage trials. However, that same day, Pfizer's CEO made more than $5 million by selling company shares. Pfizer says the sale date had been agreed to for months. Our business editor, Stephen Carroll, joins us now via Skype to further discuss. Stephen, this timing raising some eyebrows. What more can you tell us?
Well, this sale was disclosed in a filing to the stock market regulator in the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission. And what we learned in it is that Albert Bourla had sold more than 132,000 shares on Monday at a share price of just under $42 a piece. That would be close to the highest level that the shares hit on Monday when they had surged over the coronavirus vaccine. Now, the news, of course, had been good news for the company's share price, sending it up by almost 15% on Monday. But this share sale was actually agreed back in August. In fact, the company says that the filing was made because there are strict rules around how executives can sell shares in publicly listed companies. So there are special agreements that have to be put in place. It's called a 10b5-1, the filing that has to be made. And one of those was agreed on August 19th. What you have to do is agree how many shares you want to sell, in what price range you want to sell them, and during what time period. And that written agreement has to be on condition that the person who wants to sell the shares shares doesn't have any what's called material non-public information that could give them insider knowledge of something that might move the share price. Now, at the time in August when this agreement was signed, it would have been around the time that Pfizer was recruiting participants for the late-stage trial of its vaccine, so it would have been before that final stage, the crucial final stage of testing would have begun, and Albert Bourla would have agreed on the number of shares he wanted to sell, the time period over which he wanted to sell them, and the price range, and that's how this share sale took place on Monday. Now, it is, of course, at a time when there was so much attention on Pfizer because of its vaccines, and while it is something that is completely legal and something that had been very carefully regulated, it is at a time, though, that companies who are publicly listed have been warned by the head of the SEC, or cautioned, I should say, not to engage in big share sales during the pandemic because it could look bad and look like that they're taking advantage of knowledge that they may have. But of course, these sales, as I say, are heavily regulated, and certainly Pfizer's CEO had completed all of the paperwork months before we would have known anything about these late-stage trials of the vaccine.
Right, of course, nobody wants to be seen as profiting off of this pandemic. Stephen Carroll, thank you so much for that business update.
And it's really important to fact-check things, Renata. It's 5.6 million and not 56 billion. So,
right.
just a really huge correction, because the amounts, 5.6 and 56 billion, that's like a huge...
But 5.6 is still a lot.
It still is a lot, but one virologist is now saying that this vaccine is fragile because it has to be stored in a temperature of minus 75 degrees. Meaning that it poses an issue and a concern as it pertains to transportation, because, well, storage capacities, and there are limitations as it pertains to storage to get this vaccine to certain parts of the world. So something to look at and pay attention there as it pertains to this particular vaccine.
That's right. But guys, we're going to go to a break. Coming up next, well, it's World Diabetes Day on Saturday. We'll be right back. And for World Diabetes Day 2020, the International Diabetes Foundation is requesting national governments to recognize and advance the role of nurses in diabetes care. As the number of people with diabetes continues to rise across the world, the role of nurses and other health professional support staff is becoming increasingly important in managing the impact of the condition. And I came across this really interesting video from World Diabetes Day.
We're facing a global pandemic of diabetes, especially type 2, which is potentially preventable in many cases, but sadly half the people that have it probably don't know they have it. We know there are high-risk groups who are at greater risk of diabetes, so I think selective screening of high-risk groups may well be effective. If we catch people early in the, if you like, the pre-diabetes phase, there's so much we can do. Diet, a sensible diet, and exercise. You don't have to flog yourself in the gym. You can just do 45 minutes walking a day. There has been a huge step forward in technology, using insulin infusion devices and also continuous glucose monitoring. And these can just be sitting on the arm. And at any time you can just put your phone there and you can get your blood glucose reading. And this stops the regular finger pricking, which is day in, day out, quite a burden. So we're focusing this year on the role and the importance of the diabetes specialist nurse and midwife. Our nurses in my hospital can prescribe insulin and all hypoglycemic agents. So the nurse is pivotal in the team. If you ask me who was the most important in the team, I would probably say the nurse and the patient.
And the World Diabetes Day is, of course, recognized on the 14th of November every year. And you know, one of the really interesting ways that they mentioned earlier on in that video is that we're in a global pandemic.
Right.
And they weren't referring to COVID-19. They were specifically referring to diabetes. And of course, I'm not sure if you guys know, but diabetes is one of the leading causes of death in the world. Yeah, really, really not good, Kimberly. Not good at all.
Yeah. But do we have the stats for Trinidad and Tobago, Renata?
I believe we do, and I think the Ministry of Health virtual media conference, they would have covered some of the pointers as it pertains to the stats as it relates to diabetes.
In the 60s, the prevalence of diabetes in this country was 3.4%. It's a vast difference, it's almost 6 times as less. And when we travel up to the 80s, 20 years later, the prevalence was 10%. And today, 40 years later, it's 22%. So that's the prevalence of the disease. What about mortality of the disease? A little bit of history too. In the 60s, it was the 7th leading cause of death. So diabetes was pretty rare.
Yeah, so what he was saying is that in the 60s, it was the 7th ranked cause of death right here in Trinidad and Tobago. But now, in 2020, it's number 2.
Yeah,
It's number 2, and it accounts for 17% of all causes mortality.
You know, I feel like lots of times, Kimberly, you know, some things can be prevented based on, you know, the way that we live our lives. And sometimes when you're talking sickness and stuff like that, and diseases such as diabetes and stuff like that, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak from a medical perspective, but I'm just thinking, you know, we teach people to pay attention to these things when they're going down in age and not adopt certain lifestyle habits from a young age when you can control certain things. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like when you're growing up from a kid, you stay away from certain foods, you manage your intake of certain things, so you're better able to, you know, prevent developing certain illnesses and stuff like that when you grow
and
a
these,
little older.
like you mentioned, these things are most of the times preventable. It's not like it just creeps up on us. It has to do with diets. And I mean, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we use a lot of starchy foods. We use a lot of rice. White rice in particular is horrible in terms of starch. And then you have, you know, the flour and all of these things. So when you really look at it, our diet is very starchy, generally speaking. And it's something we all need to pay attention to.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you're eating sweet stuff all the time, because that's not really what it is. You know, yes, in addition to eating sweet stuff, just the normal everyday things that we eat that make up our daily diet, we need to pay attention to. And the other thing too is exercise. Again, I'm not a doctor, Renata is not a doctor, but you know, these are things you hear all the time in order to have and maintain a really good and healthy and a good quality of life. You know, exercise and eating healthily and you know, just having good relationships with people and laughing and all of these things help with our health. So it's just one of those things to pay attention to. Again, NCDs like diabetes is preventable in most cases. So we just really need to pay attention.
Be educated and educate your kids as well. You know, most of the times kids, you know, kids like to gravitate to junk food and stuff like that, but I feel like we need to adopt as a nation, as a society, we need to adopt it as culture, Kimberly, to change some of our eating habits. You understand what I'm saying? We are accustomed to very bad eating habits here in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't want to knock any other country because I don't live there, but I personally know right here in Trinidad we have some really terrible eating habits.
Yeah,
so we need to change that. But guys, we're going to go to a break. Coming up next, we stay with the topic. No, we're not going to a break. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Director. We're going to go straight to that right now. Some quick facts about World Diabetes Day.
So Renata, before we go to that, you know, I just want to say, when it comes to diabetes, I feel like all of us know someone that has diabetes.
Yes.
I think that because it's so prevalent, it's about 22% as mentioned by the Ministry of Health. We all know someone with diabetes. Really interesting thing.
Definitely. But if we could have the slide up. So diabetes is the majority of diabetes deaths occur in low to middle income countries.
And 2020 theme, the nurse and diabetes.
People with diabetes can live long and healthy lives when their diabetes is detected and well managed.
And well, it's World Diabetes Day.
Type 2 diabetes is more prevalent than type 1.
Diabetes facts: 2 major forms of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Third type of diabetes has been identified as
Gestational diabetes.
Sorry, I can't see this thing from here.
422 million people around the world have diabetes, and that number is steadily increasing. The number has been, over the past 3 decades.
And one of the leading causes of death in the world, 1.5 million persons died because of diabetes in 2012.
Countries with lowest diabetes rates is Lithuania, Estonia, and Ireland, just to name a few.
And China ranks number 1 for diabetics in the world with 116 million persons. That's really interesting.
Yep. 116 million.
But that's really, really interesting, because when we talk China and Asia, we usually kind of, in particular China, we think of persons eating pretty healthy over on that side.
It's true. When I think about their diets, I think more steamed foods. I don't know. This is just me thinking off the top of my head. I've not been to China.
I think that's the misconception of a lot of us. We see certain things through media and all these things, and we don't actually know what happens in this space. But that's really interesting fact there.
Definitely. But guys, we're almost out of time, but we're going to go to our post for the day. Repeat after me. I am no longer making myself available for toxic people.
And I will repeat it. I'm no longer making myself available for toxic people.
Are you really going to, never mind, Kimberly, it's so funny that you repeated me. Anyways, I came across this post. It's actually one of the first things that I woke up this morning, was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw this. I'm like, wow, this is really, it's a message for me this morning. And it's funny, Kimberly, I came across a video. I'm not prepared to share it now, but basically what the video was stating, the woman in the video, she's like, you need to say no to certain things. And then I saw this post and I'm like, okay, right, this is confirmation. I definitely need to share this with you guys. I'm no longer making myself available for toxic people. I feel like lots of times in relationships, specifically toxic relationships, we have a tendency of, there's always something, Kimberly, there that pulls you back to the toxic relationship, so the toxic person, and there are several reasons for that. Thank you very much, director. He's in my ears saying stuff. But yeah, guys, there's several reasons for that, and it's just a reminder, if you are in a toxic relationship, and I'm not, we don't have time to share pointers in terms of identifying what a toxic relationship is, but if you are in a toxic relationship, I want to tell you something. It's okay to leave. Right. It's okay to leave.
Yeah, but sometimes, I just want to say this, sometimes I will use the word sometimes. I'm using that term very loosely. Sometimes, both persons have a level of toxic traits.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we sometimes need to pay attention to ourselves as well,
Yep,
the other person might be toxic, but we might be toxic as well. But guys, we're all out of time. And don't forget to catch our repeats at 11 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. And remember, we have Christmas movies every day from Monday to Friday at 3 p.m. Why did I go to say
3
5
p.m.
We're at 5
concerts. We have concerts on Friday, and we also have movies on Saturday at 12 noon, I believe, Kimberly.
Yes, and they're all uninterrupted, guys, but we're all out of time. It was so lovely spending this time with you this
See
evening.
you guys tomorrow for Friday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for viewing. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at ACTN The Voice.